All right, so we're going to finish up talking about stress, okay, and then we are going to talk about happiness. The stuff today, this is not particularly challenging information, but I'm going to want want participation, and yeah, so there's an idea in psychology that was popular back in like the 70s and 80s that if you were mad about something, the best thing to do was to somehow take out your aggression on someone or something or through aggressive fantasy or whatnot. So, like, if you're mad at your mom, a good thing to do was to go punch a punching bag or to slam the door or whatnot, or to kick your dog, or not really. That's called displacement. Okay. Um, but there's this idea, and this idea is called the catharsis hypothesis. Catharsis is emotional relief through some sort of aggressive action. Right? And this was popular for a while. Now, what do you think? Do you all think it is actually healthy to basically relieve aggression by being aggressive? If you're pissed off at your boyfriend, okay, slap him or whatever, okay? Is that a healthy way to relieve aggression? No, it is not. Anybody have an idea why? Why is that not a healthy way to relieve aggression or stress? Aiden, very well said. That is exactly what it is. All right. What they have found is that it helps you feel better in the short term. Like you feel like you're like, oh, that felt good. But in the long term, it actually makes you more aggressive. Okay. Because aggression there is negatively reinforced. By being aggressive, it relieves your aggressive urges in the short term, but then you learn, like, oh shit, I can do that. And that made me feel better. Okay. So they've actually found that it makes us more aggressive in the long run. The best way to relieve aggression is to do what? If you're mad at somebody, what's the best thing to do? Or mad about something? All right, talking through it. Okay. But then also, if you just need to like let off steam, like go for a run or workout. Okay. Do non aggressive physical actions. Okay. Or just cry. Okay. Crying actually, David, crying is actually helpful in this situation. Okay. But being aggressive to relieve aggression um, is not helpful. Okay. Think about like anytime you're mad and you're like slam you're like, all right, that felt good, but actually you feel sometimes more pissed off afterwards. All right. So any questions on catharsis? Pretty straightforward. All right, happiness. And let me grab that. What are the factors that contribute to our happiness or our unhappiness? One of the things that they've really looked at a lot is what is called explanatory style, right? Explanatory style is essentially basically how do we explain things that happen in our life? What is our basic outlook on life? People with an optimistic explanatory style. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean like optimistic, like some people are like so optimistic, they just think everything's going to work out and whatnot, and that's kind of annoying. Okay. But people with an optimistic explanatory style tend to cope better with stressful situations because they believe that they have more control over events in their life. Whether it's real or perceived control, simply having perceived control can actually help us deal with stress. That's why it's good to when your grandparents like get older, it's good to give them the sense that they still have control over everything in their life, even if they don't really in real life. Okay. Having this, when people that have this, that have a sense of control over their life, are said to have something we'll talk about next class or next unit, what is called an internal, that says internal, locus of control. And they tend to have high self efficacy, which is the term that they love in this class that we'll talk about next unit, which just means their belief in their ability to succeed at things. Okay, but people with an optimistic explanatory style tend to have better health, they get better grades, they're in better moods all the time because they feel a sense of control. Whether things end up good or bad, they feel like they were in control of it at all times. People with a pessimistic explanatory style expect things to go badly. And they tend to doubt their own ability and they doubt their sense of control. They think that things are up, they leave things up to fate, luck, whatever. Okay. It's up to, it's up to a higher power. All right. All of these things. Okay. This is what is referred to as an external locus. They believe that things are outside of, like, it's out of their hands. This is like what my dad is like this. My dad is like, if the glass is half empty or is half empty, then that means it's mostly empty. Like it's not even half empty. It's like he's like Eeyore. Okay, so I'm gonna do a quick little collaboration board. Anybody have any questions about that? Does anybody watch What We Do in the Shadows on Hulu? No. If you like very dry, kind of dark comedy, it's very, very funny. All right, so imagine that you badly failed the Unit 8 AP Psychology test. Write down a few possible reasons why you might have failed. I know it says it's waiting for teacher input. I am waiting to approve. I want people to put their answer before I put a bunch of stuff on there so that people give just what they think. Okay. All right, so I put some up there. I want you to look through them. And then in the chat, I want you to put ones that stand out as what do you think, which ones would fall into an optimistic explanatory style, and which ones would fall into a pessimistic explanatory style? Okay. And just put in the chat like some of them that you think. Say just put like in there like this example. Okay. All right. Yeah, Arnav, I think that would be correct. Okay. Yep. Aiden. Batar, part of yours would be right. Let's see. All right, Aiden, yes, that would be correct. Okay. All right, yeah. Okay. So what do we think? What would the most common one obviously is didn't study enough, right? Would not studying be optimistic or pessimistic? Optimistic. Why would that be optimistic? Yes, exactly. What about like what about not having enough time on the test? Optimistic or pessimistic? Pessimistic. Yep, because it's an external. You don't have any control over that. Okay. Um, yeah, I think lack of confidence would be pessimistic. Uh, Not understanding the material would be optimistic, I believe, because that's something that you have control over. Well, that one's tough, but yeah. All right. So, anybody got any questions about explanatory style? So, obviously, people with an optimistic explanatory style tend to be happier. All right, couple other concepts. Feel good, do good is exactly what it sounds like. When we're in a good mood, we're more helpful. Okay. If you want your mom or dad to drive you somewhere, okay, ask them when they're happy. If your parents want you to do something, they should ask you when you're in a good mood. They found that people are more giving. Like people give to charity more when they're happy. People give to the homeless more when they're happy. And then, all right, so how do we measure happiness? And that seems like it would be a tough thing to do, but they've kind of figured out how to do it. So in the 70s, there was this idea, 70s and 80s, there was this idea of what was called gross domestic happiness. And it came from this tiny little country called Bhutan in Southeast Asia that said that it was like the happiest country in the world. Right. And what they wanted to do was kind of try to measure individual countries' happiness. And this has become known as what is called subjective well-being. Subjective well-being is a combination of what are called self-report inventories, which is where you just give like your own feelings about how you feel. Okay. And then they combine that with looking at the physical health of people in a country, economic health of people in a country, and whatnot. And from that, they get essentially a number through that term we talked about last unit, factor analysis. Does anybody know what country is considered to be the happiest country in the world? We're actually going to watch a video about it at the end. Avanti, that's close. That's close. Bhutan at one point was considered to be, but it's not anymore. But that's where this idea of measuring happiness came from. Okay, Avanti, that is correct. Tarv, no. Switzerland is not. The Swiss are not particularly. The Swiss and the Austrians are not particularly happy people. Okay, all right. The happiest country in the world, at least as of 2019, was Finland. Okay, but those Nordic countries, the Scandinavian countries, Finland, Norway, Sweden, and Denmark are consistently up there in the top. And when we watch the video is really interesting because a lot of the factors that go into this subjective well-being and what they point out is what makes the Finnish people really happy are things that in the United States we like balk at and think that it's like the axis of evil to have like these certain circumstances, and you'll see what they are. All right, but okay. All right, so real quick, does money buy happiness? People are like, yes, no. The answer is kind of. All right, to a certain extent, it does. What they have found, yeah, they are much more sustainable in those countries. Yeah, they focus on sustainability and not having a big wealth gap. But what they have found is that up until a certain point, it does, but then after that, it levels off. So having more and more money doesn't buy happiness, but having a certain level of money does. Now this, I don't know why in our book they had a graph from 2009, and our textbook's new, but this is from 2009 where it says about $15,000 is the cutoff per year. It's got to be higher than that. The last number I've seen is about 35,000. Okay, but above that, there doesn't seem to be a significant difference in level of happiness. I don't know. This graph doesn't make much sense to me. Okay, because it only goes up to $40,000, which now in 2021 is not a lot. Like, is not a very good salary. Oh, you know what? I did. I wasn't paying much. I wasn't. I didn't even pay much attention to. I didn't even notice the dates on the bottom. Yeah, well, percentage. Yeah, so well, if you think about it, in 1965, that's interesting. Like happiness and personal income seem to be at the same level. Like that was where they like what's that called on a graph when two factors cross like um yeah, but like that we could say that maybe that was like the sweet spot right there. Okay. Yeah. And as income has gone up, yeah, I would totally misinterpreted this graph. Okay, as income has gone up, reported happiness has stayed the same. All right, that makes more sense there. Yeah. All right, so I'm going to have you do another little, this is going to be a little poll. I want you to assume that on a scale of 1 to 10, your neutral level of happiness is a 5. Okay, meaning a 5 is just like where you are regularly. You're not ecstatic, you're not sad, you're just you. Okay, if you won $100 million tomorrow, what do you think your overall level of happiness would be in a year relative to your happiness right now? If your happiness right now is a 5, and this is a poll on if your happiness is a 5 right now, how much happier do you think you would be in a year after winning $100 million? So, no, this is just a hypothetical situation. It's not like, you don't have to set up like a tax credit or a tax shelter or anything like that. All right, so go ahead and um, answer, put what you think, all right, here on the poll. Okay. All right. So, 7% of you all can't be bothered to do this, but okay. So I'll share the results here. All right. So it looks like about 44% of you all said that your your level of happiness would be slightly above average. Okay, slightly above 5. If 5 is your average level, it would be slightly above that a year after winning $100 million. All right, so now I want you to answer this question in a poll. Assume that on a scale of 1 to 10, your neutral level of happiness is a 5. If you were in a car accident and became a quadriplegic tomorrow, what do you think your overall level of happiness would be in a year relative to your happiness right now? Now, just so we know, quadriplegic is somebody who loses use of all of their limbs. Okay, so there you go. Go ahead and answer that. Okay, all right, so here we go. All right, so it looks like about 41, 61, 65. About 80% of you all say that you would be at least like a good bit below average in happiness. Okay, and that makes sense. Okay, the idea of becoming a quadriplegic, just the thought of it, all right, is really, really difficult to wrap your head around. But based off of psychological research, what they have actually found is that for both of these, winning $100 million or becoming a quadriplegic, for both of them, after a little bit of time, you're actually just going to kind of go back to neutral. Okay, back to your basic level of happiness. This idea that happiness is relative to our own experiences is what is called adaptation level phenomenon. Okay, essentially, it is just We adapt. All right. Whatever new situation we are put in, all right, new situations, we adapt to them and they eventually will become, and this is a phrase that I've always used, what we call the new normal. Okay. Any new situation might seem crazy for a bit, but if you're in it long enough, that just becomes neutral. That just becomes what you do. We adjust to neutral levels. What in clinical psychology is actually called regression to the mean, where eventually that basically means people with mental disorders eventually go back to, like, they get actually get better just as you get older naturally. Um, but we just adjust to neutral levels. Brightness of lights, right? When you're in a dark room and the lights get turned on, your eyes have to adjust, but your eyes adapt pretty quickly. Loudness of noise. If you're playing music real loud in the car and you're in there for a while, it doesn't sound loud. But then you get back in, but you forgot to turn down the volume, and all of a sudden you get in and it just explodes. It sounds loud as shit because you're not used to it. You haven't adapted to it. Level of income. Okay. If I were to find out today that I was getting a $50,000 raise, that would be fantastic. But in a couple of months, you know, in a couple of months, it would just be normal. My salary, my yearly salary would just be $105,000. Okay, and that would just be what I make. That would be neutral. Okay, so eventually, no matter what the situation, usually we adjust to it. I'll give you another example, and then well, and this is why, like, when we are put in brand new situations, they seem like so out of the ordinary too. Like, I always think about with lacrosse, if like if we have like a September workout and it's usually like 85, 90 degrees outside, and then we get a beautiful fall day and it's like 65 degrees. All right. If everybody's used to 85, 90 degrees, all the girls are coming out. They're like Lauren McGraw is like bundled up. She's wearing like sweats and a hoodie and like has her hood up because you're not used to it. All right. It feels really cold based off of what you were used to. But then right now, when we're used to the cold, right? And then workout, 2 days ago it was 70 degrees, and like 70 is not particularly hot, but everybody's out like, oh my God, it's so hot outside because they're not adapted to it yet. All right. And eventually we just adapt to it. Um, I'll give you another example, and then I have a poll, I have a collaboration board on the next slide. But relationships, what tends to happen after about 6 months in a relationship? Okay. All right. And it might not be necessarily a rough phase, but the first 6 months of a relationship is called what? Honeymoon phase. Right. And it might, Taylor says, it gets boring. Sometimes you're like, well, all right, the luster is gone here. But sometimes it's like that's just your life at that point. That's just, you're just used to it. And so you don't have the ecstatic, oh, I can't wait to see this person, because it's just neutral then. So I want you in the collaboration board. Okay, I want you to see if you can think of other examples from your own life of adaptation level phenomenon, when maybe something is something new and novel, and then after a while it just becomes kind of whatever. Gonna see if anybody gets the one that is like the most obvious right now. All right, yep, Ryan got it. Yeah, I'll post these here in a sec once more people have posted. But Mia, that's a really good example. Yep, Isha. Okay, all right. Well, guys, when I ask for examples, don't just give me the example that I gave you before. Like one of the examples on here is the one that like I literally just I gave you as a poll. Okay. All right, so oh crap, sorry, I just accidentally X'd out of one of them. All right, so there's some good one. There's some good ones. All right, online learning. Okay, that was hard as shit at first, and now it's just kind of like what we do. Yeah, quarantine. The beginning of quarantine was like, what? We can't go anywhere. Like, we can't do this. Now it's just kind of like, all right, well, this is what we're doing. Um, masks. Just like 6 months ago, the idea of wearing a mask, and there's still some idiots that don't do it, but like the idea of wearing a mask, like what? We have to wear a mask, which is also something that has been like people in like Asia have done for a long time. Um, but now, to be honest, like not only am I kind of used to it, I kind of like it a little bit. Like especially like going out and like going to like the grocery store or whatnot. Like you don't have to talk to people that you because like you can kind of pretend like I don't recognize anyone because I don't because they have a mask on. Yeah, new diet, having a broken collarbone. How long has your collarbone been broken for? You just sitting there just with a broken collarbone, just being like, all right, this is just my life right now. For the rest, like, okay, yeah, moving to another country. Get something that you wanted for a long time and then use it twice. Yeah, think about when you were like a little kid and you get like a new toy and it's like awesome for a little bit and then you're like, all right, I'm done with that. Or like the Mia's example of like walking the dog. Like you get a dog and it's really excited to take him for a walk, and then after a while, you're like, yeah, whatever. Okay, I think it'd be weird for you to go back to in school teaching for like a full class. No, it won't be like it might take, to be honest, no, I don't think it'll be weird. It was weird, like, because I've been doing my usual stuff with like only a couple kids in here. No, I'm ready. I'm ready for it to be full classes. Okay. All right. So good job on that. When your brother was born, is super happy, but now it's whatever. Yeah. Well, yeah. Siblings, like you adapt to like I'm not every time I see my brother Boo, I'm not like, oh, Boo, I'm so excited to see you. I've only known you for 30 years. Okay. All right. So not only is happiness relative to our own experience, our own happiness is also relative to others' success. How happy we are is a lot of times dependent upon how successful we see other people that we compare ourselves to. And I think that this is one of the biggest contributors to overall unhappiness. This is what is called relative deprivation. Okay. Relative deprivation is this idea that we oftentimes perceive ourselves as being worse off than the people than our peers, than the people that we compare ourselves to. For instance, places with large income inequality, like the United States, tend to be less happy. The United States is not a happy country. Okay, I mean, look, January 6th, there was a mob that tried to overthrow the Capitol. That's not the indicator of a country that is happy with things. Okay, it's just overall. But because if we don't make enough, if you don't make a lot of money, but then you have a very large upper class, all right, we automatically assume that because those people are make more money, we assume that they are much happier than we are. How many of you all have? So here's an example from school. Let's say that you're in a class and you usually get like 75s on tests in the class, and then you like really knock it out of the park on one, and you get like an 88 on test. You get it back and you're like, hell yeah, I did so well, very proud of yourself. And then you ask your friend what they got, and they got a 98. And you're like, well, shit, I'm dumb again. Okay. Has that ever happened to anybody? Yes. Okay. Yeah. All right. We all do it, and we shouldn't, but we do. Okay. We get something that we're happy with, and then we find out that somebody else got something better, and all of a sudden it makes our thing look like dog shit. Okay. This is, if anybody's ever heard the phrase keeping up with the Joneses. The idea that like people want to the idea that people like, if you're in a neighborhood and you look around and like your next door neighbor gets a new car, you're like, damn, well, I got a piece of shit, so I got to get a new car now. Okay. And so this idea came from, it actually was discovered during World War II. And I think this is really interesting. In World War II, we had black soldiers, right? But the military was still segregated at that point. But they did a study, I believe it was at Fort Benning in Georgia, where, we had black soldiers and white soldiers. They were segregated, but the black and white soldiers had the exact same facilities. They had the same barracks, they ate the same food, they did the same training, they were just segregated. But when asked about their overall level of happiness in this, the black soldiers rated themselves as significantly happier in their situation at boot camp than the white soldiers did. Now, does anybody have a guess why? Why might they're both in the same circumstances? Why might the black soldiers have been happier with it than the white soldiers were? Not, I mean, maybe there was some of that, but that's not necessarily the conclusion that they came to. Think about it in terms of relative deprivation. Okay. All right, Arnav, that's correct. Okay, anybody else have a guess? Overall, in 1943, who had it better in America, white people or black people? The white people. All right. If we compare our circumstances to our peers, okay, we got white dudes in boot camp, and they're hearing about like all the fun that their friends not in boot camp are having, frolicking around Cape Cod and eating lobster and whatever. Okay, and they think, wow, my situation is so shitty compared to that. But the black people, but the black soldiers, looking at the situation that maybe they came from, that their peers are in. All right, this is at the height of Jim Crow. All right, there's segregation everywhere. There are lynchings. Okay, there's massive wealth inequality. Black people are living in projects, and so comparatively, their situation at boot camp was actually viewed more favorably than what maybe their peers who were not in the military were going for. And that's where this goes backwards and forwards. We tend to believe that people who have more than we do are happier than us, which is not true. But we also tend to underestimate the happiness of those who have less than we do. Okay? If you play on a sports team and you're a starter, I just thought of this example, but you're a starter, you may look at the people who don't get a lot of playing time and they might be like, well, they must be really unhappy with that. Okay, when in fact, they might not be. They might be perfectly fine. Okay, so we tend to overestimate the level of happiness of people who have more than we do and underestimate the level of happiness of people who have less. So here's another little collaboration board. All right, see if you can come up with another example of relative deprivation. All right, yeah, Arnav. So think about it in terms of how you feel about it, about, comparing your level of happiness to somebody else's. Okay, all right, Prerna, yeah, that's a good one. All right, Kayla, yeah, that's it. That's a good one. And that in sports, that's something that can cause a lot of problems on teams. Okay. Yep. All right. Anybody else? Who else has a good one? Okay, so I want you to think about this not in terms of like other, but how like you feeling worse off about yourself when with compared to people that you compare yourself to. Okay, all right. So you if you play sports, you may think that you played a good game, but then somebody then like you had one goal, but somebody else had four goals, and you're like, well, I guess I didn't play all that well. Okay, yeah. You and with sports too, you may be a perfectly fine player, but then you may compare yourself to somebody who's a superstar, right? And then you feel like small potatoes. Is anybody in here like have all your friends have like a boyfriend or girlfriend and but you're single? Any anyone? Taylor, you are? Okay. Anybody else? This might be one that's like more applicable for people like as you get older, all right, when people start like getting married or whatnot. But yeah, we people who are single as adults like tend to overestimate like how happy people who are in relationships are, or tend to think that they are much worse off than those people sometimes. Or sometimes you look at their relationships and you're like, yeah, that's why I'm single, because I don't want to deal with that shit. Okay. All right. So, all right. So, good examples there. All right. Last thing, guys. So, we are going to watch about 8 minutes of a video that it looks at the factors